Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. Dean Walker had always considered himself an ordinary man living in an extraordinary world. In New Los Angeles, a sprawling metropolis bathed in neon lights and shrouded in smog, he worked as a mid-level technician at MEM Corp. The company was renowned for its cutting-edge memory implants, offering people experiences they could never afford or achieve in real life. For most of his adult life, Dean had been content with his mundane existence. But all of that changed one fateful night. It started with what was supposed to be just another routine memory implant. After months of saving up, Dean had finally splurged on something special, a custom-designed experience featuring an exotic alien maid named Erin. The promotional material promised an unparalleled adventure filled with passion and intrigue. It was supposed to be harmless fun, just like every other implant he tried before. But this one was different. Dean woke up in his dimly lit apartment feeling disoriented. His heart raced as fragmented images of the implant flooded his mind. Erin's azure skin shimmered under soft lighting, her violet eyes seemed to pierce through him with an intensity that left him breathless. Her voice, soft yet commanding, echoed in his ears as she leaned close and whispered words he couldn't quite recall. He stumbled out of bed, shaking off the lingering sensations. "Just a memory," he muttered under his breath. "It's not real." But as he shuffled toward the bathroom, something caught his eye, a faint glow on his wrist. He froze. There, etched into his skin like an intricate tattoo, was a strange symbol. It looked almost alive, its lines shimmering faintly under the fluorescent light. What the hell? Dean scrubbed at it furiously with soap and water, but it wouldn't budge. Panic began to creep in as he stared at the mark. It was identical to one he'd seen during the implant, on Erin's wrist. "This can't be happening," he whispered. It was just a fake memory, wasn't it? Dean tried to push aside his unease as he made his way to work. The bustling streets of New Los Angeles offered little comfort. Towering holographic billboards loomed overhead, advertising everything from synthetic food pills to luxury off-world vacations. But even amidst the chaos of city life, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. At MEM Corp's sleek glass tower, Zach, his overly cheerful co-worker, was waiting by his desk. "Rough night?" Zach asked with a smirk. "You look like you've been hit by a hover truck." Dean forced a laugh. "Yeah, something like that." "Let me guess," Zach continued, leaning in conspiratorially. "You tried one of those new premium implants? What was it? Rockstar fantasy? Galactic treasure hunt?" Dean hesitated. "Just, something simple," he lied. "A relaxing evening." Zach raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. "Well, whatever it was, you'd better snap out of it. The boss is on a rampage today." As Zach walked away, Dean sank into his chair and pulled up his holoscreen. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on work, his mind kept drifting back to Erin, and the symbol on his wrist. By lunchtime, Dean was barely holding it together. His head throbbed, and every shadow seemed to shift unnaturally at the edge of his vision. Deciding he needed air, he headed for the break room. That's when he saw her. A flash of blue skin disappeared around a corner ahead of him. "Erin," he whispered hoarsely. Without thinking, he bolted after her, weaving through crowded hallways and ignoring confused stares from coworkers. But no matter how fast he ran or how hard he searched, she was gone. Breathing heavily, Dean leaned against a wall and closed his eyes. "I'm losing my mind," he muttered. "Hey!" Zach's voice startled him out of his thoughts. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Dean forced another weak smile. "Yeah, just not feeling great." "You should go home," Zach said kindly. "Seriously, you look like you're about to pass out." Dean nodded numbly and left without another word. Back at home, things only got stranger. As he flicked on the hollow screen for some distraction, a news report caught his attention. Authorities are investigating mysterious symbols appearing across New Los Angeles, said the android anchor in its polished voice. Images flashed on screen, symbols identical to the one on Dean's wrist etched into walls and sidewalks all over the city. His blood ran cold. Before he could process what this meant, his comm unit buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. "Mr. Walker," came a deep voice on the other end. "This is William Steele from MEM Corp Security." Dean swallowed hard as Steele continued, "We believe your recent memory implant may have malfunctioned. For your safety, and ours, we need you to come into our headquarters immediately." Something about Steele's tone sent chills down Dean's spine. I don't think. "A car is already en route," Steele interrupted sharply. "Do not leave your apartment or contact anyone else until we arrive." The line went dead before Dean could respond. Moments later, headlights illuminated his window as a sleek black vehicle pulled up outside, and two men in dark suits stepped out. Panic surged through him. Grabbing only his jacket and comm unit, Dean bolted for the fire escape just as pounding echoed from his front door. "Mr. Walker. Open up. This is MEM Corp Security." Heart pounding and adrenaline surging through him like wildfire, Dean disappeared into the maze-like streets below, determined to find answers before it was too late. Dean felt the strong grip on his shoulder pull him back, halting his frantic pursuit of Aaron. He spun around to face a man dressed in a black trench coat, his face partially obscured by the brim of a wide hat. The stranger's piercing green eyes locked onto Dean's, and for a moment, neither spoke. "You don't want to go after her," the man said, his voice low and gravelly. "Not yet." Dean's heart was pounding, but he managed to stammer, "Who are you?" "What do you mean, not yet?" "I need to find her." The man tightened his grip slightly, his expression serious. "If you want answers, follow me. She'll find you when the time is right." Dean hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to keep chasing Aaron, but something about the stranger's demeanor made him pause. He nodded reluctantly and allowed himself to be led away, weaving through the bustling streets of old Chinatown. The Neon Dragon bar was tucked away in a narrow alley lit by flickering red lanterns. Its entrance was marked by a glowing holographic dragon that coiled and roared silently above the doorway. Dean followed the stranger inside, his senses immediately assaulted by the dim lighting, the hum of conversation, and the scent of spiced liquor. The bar was packed with patrons, humans and aliens alike, sharing drinks and stories in languages Dean couldn't begin to understand. The stranger led him to a secluded booth in the corner and gestured for him to sit. "Start talking," Dean demanded as he slid into the booth. "Who are you? What's going on?" The man removed his hat and leaned forward, revealing sharp features and a faint scar running down one cheek. "Name's Elias," he said. "I used to work for MEM Corp, until I found out what they were really doing." Dean narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Elias sighed heavily, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. MEM Corp isn't just in the business of creating artificial memories. They've been experimenting with alien technology, specifically interdimensional tech. Dean blinked in disbelief. Interdimensional? Like, alternate realities? Exactly, Elias confirmed. The memory implants they sell are just a front for something much bigger. They've been using alien devices to tap into other dimensions and extract real experiences from beings like Aaron. Dean felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying Aaron is real? She's not just part of an implant?" "She's very real," Elias said grimly. "And she's not supposed to be here." Dean struggled to process this revelation as Elias continued. "The symbol on your wrist," Elias explained, pointing at it, "is proof that MEM Corp's tech malfunctioned during your implant session. Instead of just experiencing Aaron's memories, you created a connection, a bridge between dimensions." Dean stared at the glowing mark on his wrist, suddenly feeling its weight more than ever before. "But why me?" he asked. "Why did this happen?" Elias shrugged. "Could be random chance, or maybe Erin chose you." Dean frowned. "Chose me? For what?" "To help her," Elias replied simply. "Her dimension is collapsing because of MEM Corp's experiments. The connection they've created is destabilizing her world, and if they keep pushing it further, it could destroy both dimensions." Dean leaned back in his seat, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was hearing. He thought about Erin, the sadness in her eyes when she looked at him, and realized she had been trying to tell him this all along. "What do I need to do?" Dean asked finally. Elias reached into his coat and pulled out a small device resembling a sleek tablet covered in glowing symbols. He slid it across the table toward Dean. "This will let you communicate with Erin directly," Elias said. "But be careful, using it will alert MEM Corp to your location." Dean hesitated before picking up the device. It felt warm in his hands, almost alive. "How does it work?" he asked. "Just focus on her," Elias instructed. "Think about her, her voice, her face, and she'll hear you." Dean took a deep breath and closed his eyes, clutching the device tightly. "Erin," he whispered aloud, feeling slightly foolish at first but quickly overwhelmed by an odd sensation, a pull deep within him that seemed to resonate with the mark on his wrist. Suddenly, her voice filled his mind, soft yet urgent. "Dean, you found me." His eyes snapped open as he saw her image projected above the device, a shimmering hologram that flickered faintly but was unmistakably Erin. "Erin," he exclaimed, relief flooding through him. She smiled faintly but looked weary. "I don't have much time," she said. "MEM Corp is hunting me, and now they're hunting you too." "I'll help you," Dean promised without hesitation. "Tell me what I need to do." Erin's expression softened slightly as she explained, "MEM Corp has built a machine that anchors my dimension to yours. It's what allowed them to extract my memories for your implant session. But it's also tearing my world apart." Dean nodded grimly, understanding what she was asking of him. "You need to destroy it," Erin continued urgently. "It's hidden deep within their headquarters, but getting there won't be easy." Before Dean could respond, Elias interrupted, "We'll figure out how to get inside, but once we do, it'll be up to you and Erin to shut that machine down for good." Their conversation was cut short by sudden commotion outside the bar, shouts and heavy footsteps echoing down the alleyway. "They've found us," Elias muttered darkly as he grabbed Dean by the arm and pulled him toward a back exit. Erin's hologram flickered out as Dean pocketed the device and followed Elias through narrow corridors leading out into another alleyway. As they emerged into the night air, Dean caught sight of several men in dark suits closing in on their location, MEM Corp agents armed with advanced weapons designed for non-lethal takedowns. "Run!" Elias barked as he shoved Dean forward. The chase was on. Dean stumbled as the grip on his shoulder jerked him backward. He spun around, his heart hammering in his chest, only to find himself face to face with Elias again. The man's green eyes were sharp, his expression unreadable. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Elias said, his voice low and urgent. "If you keep chasing her like this, you'll lead MEM Corp right to her." Dean yanked his arm free, glaring at Elias. "She was right there. I saw her. She was waiting for me." Elias shook his head. "No, Dean. That wasn't her, not entirely. What you're seeing are echoes. Fragments of her presence bleeding into this dimension because of the connection you share." Dean's frustration boiled over. "Then what am I supposed to do? Just sit around while she's out there, hunted by MEM Corp?" "No," Elias said firmly. "You're supposed to listen to me if you want to save her, and yourself." Dean hesitated, his anger giving way to doubt. He glanced back across the street, but Erin was gone, vanished into the chaos of the market. With a resigned sigh, he turned back to Elias. "Fine," Dean said. "What now?" Elias gestured toward a narrow alleyway that led deeper into old Chinatown. "Follow me." The two men walked in tense silence, the noise of the market fading behind them as they entered the quieter backstreets. The air here was cooler, tinged with the scent of rain on concrete and faint traces of incense wafting from nearby shrines. Finally, Elias stopped in front of a small, nondescript building with faded red paint and a weathered sign that read the Jade Lantern. He pushed open the door and motioned for Dean to enter. Inside was a dimly lit room filled with old wooden furniture and shelves lined with strange artifacts, alien trinkets, glowing crystals, and objects Dean couldn't begin to identify. A single elderly woman sat behind a counter, her face hidden in shadow. "Is this some kind of safe house?" Dean asked warily. Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked up to the counter and exchanged a few quiet words with the woman before turning back to Dean. "This place is off-grid," Elias explained. "MEM Corp can't track us here." Dean crossed his arms. "Great. Now tell me what's really going on." Elias sighed and gestured for Dean to sit at a nearby table. Once they were seated, he began to speak. "MEM Corp has been lying to everyone," Elias said bluntly. "Their memory implants aren't just simulations, they're stolen experiences ripped straight from other dimensions." Dean frowned. "You already told me that." "Yes," Elias admitted, "but what I didn't tell you is why it's happening, or how you fit into all of this." He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if afraid someone might overhear them despite their isolation. "The alien technology MEM Corp uses wasn't something they discovered, it was something they took from Aaron's people." Dean's eyes widened in shock. "Her people? You mean, there are more like her?" "There were," Elias said grimly. "Aaron comes from a dimension that exists parallel to ours, a world rich in energy and resources we can't even comprehend. Her species developed technology capable of bridging dimensions, but when MEM Corp found out about it, let's just say they didn't ask for permission before taking it." Dean felt a knot form in his stomach as he listened. "They've been exploiting that technology ever since," Elias continued. "At first it was just for research, exploring new worlds, gathering data, but then they realized they could monetize it by turning those worlds into sources for their memory implants." "And Aaron?" Dean asked quietly. "She's one of the last survivors of her kind," Elias said solemnly. "Her world is collapsing because MEM Corp's experiments have destabilized its core structure. The connection between your dimensions is tearing hers apart." Dean stared at the table, his mind racing as he tried to process everything he'd just heard. "So why me?" he asked finally. "Why did I end up connected to her?" Elias hesitated before answering. "Because she chose you." Dean blinked in surprise. "What?" "The connection between you and Aaron wasn't an accident," Elias explained. "When MEM Corp tried to extract her memories during your implant session, she fought back, and somehow, she managed to imprint herself onto you instead." Dean shook his head in disbelief. "But why? Why would she do that?" "Because she saw something in you," Elias said simply. "Something that made her believe you could help her." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Dean broke the silence. "So what do we do now?" Elias reached into his coat and pulled out another device, a small metallic sphere etched with glowing symbols similar to the ones on Dean's wrist. "This is a dimensional stabilizer," Elias explained as he handed it to Dean. "It'll strengthen your connection with Aaron temporarily so you can communicate with her more clearly, but it also means MEM Corp will be able to track you more easily." Dean stared at the device in his hand, its surface warm against his skin. "What happens if they find us?" he asked quietly. Elias gave him a hard look. "Then we fight, or we run." Dean nodded slowly, determination settling over him like a heavy cloak. "All right," he said firmly. "Let's do this." Elias guided Dean through activating the stabilizer, which emitted a soft hum as it came online. Focus on Erin, Elias instructed again. Think about her, her voice, her face, and let the connection guide you. Dean closed his eyes and did as he was told. Almost immediately, he felt a surge of warmth spread through his body, a sensation both comforting and overwhelming at once, and then he heard her voice again, clear and strong this time. Dean. I'm here. His eyes snapped open as Erin appeared before him, not as a flickering hologram like before but as a fully formed projection that seemed almost real. Erin, he exclaimed breathlessly. She smiled faintly but looked exhausted, her normally radiant skin dimmed slightly as if drained of energy. I don't have much time, she said urgently. They're closing in on me, and on you too. We're going to stop them, Dean promised without hesitation. Erin's expression softened slightly at his words but remained serious as she continued, MEM Corp's machine is buried deep within their headquarters, it's what anchors our dimensions together and what's causing my world to collapse. How do we destroy it? Dean asked determinedly. With this, Erin said as she raised her hand, and suddenly another symbol appeared on Dean's wrist, brighter than before and pulsing with energy. This mark is your key, she explained softly but firmly. It'll guide you, but only if you trust yourself enough to follow it. Before Dean could respond further or ask more questions about what lay ahead for them both together intertwined. This is a dead end, Elias growled, his voice barely audible above the blare of sirens in the distance. He and Dean huddled in the shadows of a derelict warehouse, the damp concrete cold against their backs. The MEM Corp agents were relentless, their pursuit tightening like a noose around them. Dean swiped sweat from his brow, his chest heaving with exertion. We lost them back at the market, he said, trying to catch his breath. How did they find us so quickly? Elias's face was grim. The stabilizer. It amplifies your connection to Erin, which means it also amplifies your signal to MEM Corp. Dean cursed under his breath. The device that was supposed to help them was now a beacon, guiding their pursuers straight to them. We need to ditch it, Dean said, reaching for the stabilizer in his pocket. No. A voice echoed in his mind, sharp and insistent. It was Erin. Don't destroy it, Dean. I need that connection. Dean hesitated, glancing at Elias. She says she needs it. Elias sighed. I figured as much. Then we need to find a way to use it to our advantage. Suddenly, the warehouse doors burst open, flooding the space with harsh light. MEM Corp agents swarmed in, weapons raised. Dean Walker. Elias Thorne. Come out with your hands up, a voice boomed through a megaphone. Elias grabbed Dean's arm, pulling him toward a hidden door at the back of the warehouse. Time to run. They sprinted through a maze of corridors, the sound of gunfire echoing behind them. The agents were closing in, their footsteps pounding against the concrete floor. As they reached another dead end, Dean felt a surge of panic. We're trapped. Not yet, Erin's voice echoed in his mind. There's another way. Focus, Dean. Let the symbol guide you. Dean closed his eyes, focusing on the mark on his wrist. It pulsed with warmth, directing him toward a seemingly solid wall. Here, Dean said, his voice trembling. There's something behind this wall. Elias raised an eyebrow skeptically but followed Dean's lead. Together, they pushed against the wall, revealing a hidden passage leading into darkness. The passage led them into a network of underground tunnels beneath the city, forgotten remnants of an old subway system. The air was thick with dust and moisture, and the darkness was almost absolute. Where are we going? Dean asked, his voice echoing through the tunnels. I don't know, Elias admitted. But it's better than being captured by MEM Corp. As they stumbled through the darkness, Erin's voice guided them, her instructions precise and unwavering. She seemed to know the tunnels intimately, leading them through a labyrinth of twists and turns. How can she see and hear? Dean asked, bewildered. She's not seeing it with her eyes, Elias explained. She's sensing the energy flow, the ley lines beneath the city. Her people are attuned to that kind of thing. Dean nodded, his mind struggling to grasp the full extent of Aaron's abilities. After what seemed like hours, they finally emerged from the tunnels into an abandoned train station, a vast, cavernous space filled with rusting tracks and decaying platforms. As they caught their breath, Aaron spoke again, her voice more urgent than ever before. "We need to talk," she said. "There's something you need to know." Dean looked around, his eyes scanning the deserted station. "Talk about what?" "About my world," Aaron replied. "About why MEM Corp is so desperate to control it." She paused, and Dean could sense the sadness in her voice. "My world is dying, Dean," she said softly. MEM Corp's experiments have destabilized its core, draining its energy and tearing apart its very fabric. Dean's heart sank as he listened to her words. "But why?" he asked. "What do they want from your world?" "They want its energy," Aaron explained. "My people discovered a way to harness the power of our dimension, a source of clean, renewable energy that could solve all of Earth's problems. But MEM Corp doesn't care about saving the planet. They only care about profit." She continued, "They believe they can weaponize that energy, create a weapon of unimaginable power that would give them absolute control over Earth and beyond." Dean felt a surge of anger at MEM Corp's greed and recklessness. "That's why they're so desperate to keep the connection open," Aaron said. "Because if they lose it, they lose access to my world, and to its power." Dean looked at Aaron, his eyes filled with determination. "Then we have to stop them," he said firmly. "We have to shut down that machine before it's too late." Aaron smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I knew I could count on you, Dean," she said. "But it won't be easy. MEM Corp will stop at nothing to protect their interests." As she spoke, Dean realized that his feelings for Aaron were growing stronger, a mix of admiration, protectiveness, and something else he couldn't quite define. He no longer saw her as just a figment of a memory implant but as a real person, a brave, intelligent, and beautiful woman who was fighting to save her world. And he was determined to help her, no matter the cost. "Where do we go from here?" Dean asked. "To MEM Corp headquarters," Aaron replied without hesitation. "That's where we'll find the machine, and that's where we'll end this once and for all." As they prepared to leave the abandoned train station, Dean couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into a trap. But he knew there was no turning back. Aaron's world, and perhaps his own, depended on their success. With Aaron guiding them, Dean and Elias ventured back into the tunnels, their footsteps echoing in the darkness as they embarked on their most dangerous mission yet. The Neon Dragon bar pulsed with a chaotic energy, a cacophony of alien languages and synth music creating a disorienting atmosphere. Dean navigated through the throng, Elias close behind, his hand resting on the energy pistol concealed beneath his coat. "Aaron said the machine is located in the central research wing," Dean said, his voice barely audible above the din. "That's where we need to go." Elias nodded grimly. "The problem is getting past security. MEM Corp headquarters is a fortress." Aaron's voice echoed in Dean's mind. "There's a service entrance on level B3. It's less heavily guarded, but you'll need to disable the cameras to get through." Dean relayed Aaron's instructions to Elias, who raised an eyebrow in surprise. "She knows the layout of MEM Corp headquarters?" Elias asked. "She said her people helped design the security systems," Dean replied. "They never anticipated their technology being used against them." As they approached the service entrance, Elias pulled out a small device, a jammer designed to disrupt electronic signals. "This will buy us a few minutes," he said, activating the device. "But we need to be quick." The service entrance was a dimly lit corridor filled with pipes and conduits. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and stale recycled air. As they moved deeper into the complex, the tension grew palpable. Suddenly, a pair of security drones appeared, their red eyes scanning the corridor. "Intruders detected," one of the drones announced in a monotone voice. "Initiating lockdown protocol." Elias reacted instantly, firing his energy pistol at the drones. The blasts ripped through the air, disabling the drones with a shower of sparks. "Let's go!" Elias shouted, grabbing Dean's arm and pulling him forward. They sprinted through the corridors, dodging security cameras and laser grids. Erin's voice guided them, her instructions precise and unwavering. "Turn left at the next intersection," she said. "Then follow the blue conduit to the main research wing." As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Dean couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He knew that William Steele and his team were closing in on them, their pursuit relentless. Finally, they reached the entrance to the central research wing, a massive steel door sealed with multiple layers of security. "This is it," Dean said, his heart pounding in his chest. "The machine has to be behind this door." Elias pulled out a small device, a hacking tool designed to bypass electronic locks. "Stand back," he said, attaching the device to the door's control panel. "This might take a while." As Elias worked to crack the security code, Dean stood guard, his eyes scanning the corridor. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the hacking device. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the complex, bathing the corridor in flashing red light. "They know we're here." Elias shouted, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I need more time." Dean raised his energy pistol, bracing himself for the inevitable confrontation. Moments later, the steel door hissed open, revealing a vast chamber filled with humming machinery in glowing energy fields. In the center of the chamber stood a massive device, a complex array of alien technology that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. "That's it," Erin's voice echoed in Dean's mind. "That's the machine that's tearing my world apart." As they stepped into the chamber, William Steele and his team emerged from the shadows, weapons raised. "It's over, Walker," Steele said, his voice cold and emotionless. "You can't stop us." Dean glared at Steele, his anger burning like a fire in his chest. "You're wrong, Steele," Dean said. "We're going to shut down this machine and save both our worlds." Steele laughed. "You're a fool, Walker. You don't understand the power we wield. We're on the verge of unlocking the secrets of interdimensional travel, of harnessing energy beyond your wildest dreams. At the cost of destroying another world." Dean retorted. "Is that what you really want?" Steele's expression hardened. "Sometimes, sacrifices must be made for the greater good." "There's no greater good in destroying an entire civilization," Dean said. "You're just power-hungry, Steele. You don't care about anyone but yourself." Steele raised his hand, signaling his team to attack. "Take them down," he ordered. A fierce firefight erupted, energy blasts ricocheting off the walls and machinery. Dean and Elias fought back to back, their weapons blazing. As the battle raged, Dean could feel Erin's presence growing stronger, her energy resonating within him. "I can guide you, Dean," she said. "I can show you how to disable the machine." Dean nodded, trusting in Erin's guidance. She led him through the maze of machinery, directing him to a specific control panel. "This is it, Dean," she said. "You need to overload the core." Dean reached for the controls, his fingers trembling. He knew that what he was about to do could have unforeseen consequences. "Are you sure about this, Erin?" he asked. "Trust me, Dean," she replied. "It's the only way to save my world, and yours." Taking a deep breath, Dean activated the overload sequence. The machine began to vibrate violently, its energy fields flickering and distorting. Alarms blared throughout the chamber as the core began to destabilize. Steele watched in horror as his life's work began to crumble before his eyes. "No," he screamed. "You can't do this." As the machine reached critical mass, a blinding light filled the chamber, followed by a deafening explosion. When the light subsided, Dean found himself lying on the floor, his ears ringing. Elias was beside him, coughing and sputtering. The machine was gone, reduced to a pile of smoldering rubble. The connection between dimensions had been severed. As Dean stood up, he saw Erin standing before him, her form shimmering faintly. "It's done, Dean," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You saved my world." Dean smiled, relief flooding through him. "We did it together, Erin," he said. Erin reached out to touch Dean's face, her fingers brushing against his cheek. "Thank you, Dean," she whispered. "I'll never forget you." As their fingers touched, a surge of energy passed between them, creating a bond that transcended dimensions. But then, Erin's form began to fade, her image flickering and distorting. "I have to go now, Dean," she said sadly. "The connection is broken. I can't stay here any longer." Dean's heart sank as he realized what was happening. "Will I ever see you again?" he asked, his voice filled with longing. Erin smiled faintly. "Perhaps, in another lifetime," she said. "But for now, goodbye, Dean." With those words, Erin vanished, leaving Dean alone in the ruined chamber. Dean stood there for a long moment, staring at the space where Erin had been. He knew that he would never forget her, her courage, her intelligence, her beauty. He had saved her world, but he had also lost something precious in the process. Turning to Elias, Dean said, "Let's go. It's time to go home." As they left the ruined chamber, Dean couldn't help but wonder what the future held. He knew that his life would never be the same after his encounter with Erin. He had seen the wonders of another world, and he had fought to save it. And in doing so, he had discovered a part of himself he never knew existed. The adventure was over, but the memories, and the mark on his wrist, would stay with him forever.